Welcome back for another episode of Sunday Soul Day. If you've ever struggled with anxiety, perfectionism, complex trauma, or the lasting impact of narcissistic abuse, this episode is for you. We are joined by Renee Minx, a trauma informed somatic therapist and trauma coach, and we unpack how to heal from emotional, physical, spiritual, and sexual trauma using a mind, body, spirit approach. Let's welcome her to the show. Welcome to Sunday Soul Day, Renee.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Likewise, I could not wait for this conversation. I was really excited because of your focus, not only on trauma, but also the mind, body, spirit connection. For me, I have centered my whole platform around mind, body, soul connection. And so very similar. And I'm also a coach as well. And I work with leaders. So I was just really thrilled to get you on and have, an audience learn a little bit more about you and kind of what you do.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. Yeah, I feel like those of us who are drawn to this field are typically kind of like the wounded healers, and we have that passion for what, we do based on what we've been through and grown through. So, yeah,
Exactly.
fellow survivor sounds like.
Yes, exactly. I like to actually say I'm a thriver,
Mhm.
because, I'm definitely past the survivor point. I think we're when we operate in survival mode, it's just very different. But I'm now at a place where I'm operating in a thriving mode, which allows me to help others. So
I
yeah.
love
Yeah.
survivors and thrivers.
Yes, ma'am. I love it. I know we chatted a little bit before we started recording, and I am just thrilled for the audience to learn a little bit more about you. So, you've actually spoken very at length on your social media about your own lived experience with trauma, anxiety, and depression. Like, how has your personal healing journey shaped your approach to therapy and coaching?
Mhm. I would say it's shaped it significantly in the sense of I've kind of been able to be my own guinea pig of, okay, what works? Like what really worked for me, what didn't work. I think there's a part of being a helper or a therapist or a coach that can't be taught in the sense that when you are speaking with someone, you kind of get that sense that they know the emotion that you're talking about. They don't have to have gone through the exact same event, but it's like they can hold that healing container because they too have been through darkness and you don't even really need to speak about it. Like when I'm with my clients, it's not like I'm bringing up my own trauma because it's about them. And because I've been through this, I have the passion to pursue this niche of narcissistic abuse healing and also just trauma healing in general. So I would say it's kind of like the fire that lights the passion I have to be in this field.
Wow, I love that. And you're so spot on. It's like they don't even have to have the same trauma, but just going through, I think it's a common denominator in the human experience is just trauma, pain, suffering and transitions. It's very interesting that you called that out. Tell us a little bit about your trauma and the trauma that you've experienced. As much as you're comfortable with sharing.
Yeah. So I believe in being as transparent as possible due to the fact that this is what I ask of my clients and I see their bravery and I want to be a person that kind of like practices what I preach. It's so important. And so my history of trauma, I've been through physical, emotional, sexual, mental abuse growing up by my primary caretaker. So I lived in two-parent household. One of my parents went and worked. The roles were kind of reversed as far as gender goes, and my primary caregiver that really was at home with me, he was a narcissist and also a family member. And so this person was my kind of perpetrator growing up. And, that sort of attachment wound of having the person that you're supposed to feel safe with when all the world, could be against you or all the world, is just tough growing up. And just any time in life, you want to have that secure attachment with a parent. And instead of, going home to a safe place, you go home to the most unsafe place that you could possibly imagine. It becomes really tricky. And my identity, my sense of self, who I was in relation to other people, my trust in other people, my trust in the world. It shaped every single part of me because I know now how important attachment is to just every fiber of our being. And yeah, so there's kind of this analogy that I find really interesting is like our fight or flight, our nervous system responses, our trauma responses. Those were put in place originally, like if we saw a bear, like an animal that might attack us, we go into fight, freeze, or befriend mode. And a lot of folks with trauma, we go home to the bear. It's not a one-time event. It's not we see this bear in the wilderness, a fight or flight. Then after we're safe, our systems are able to rest and I'm safe and okay, I'm able, like my cortisol is able to slow down. It's like, no, you go home to either the parent or the partner who
Mhm.
is the bear and
Yes.
you are unsafe and your system never has time to slow down and feel okay.
Oh my gosh, you just gave me chills saying that because that was a lived experience for me in relationships and also kind of growing up in a narcissistic family system. I think it's really hard to explain to people what it does to your body. You can feel it, all the time, and you take it and carry it into all of your, like you said, your experiences. And, for me in my, one of my relationships, it was very much that, where my cortisol was so high, like I couldn't quite, regulate myself until I separated myself from that situation. And I think it's even worse when it's within your home, as a child. Like you can't quite wrap your mind around what's happening, and you don't have the tools, the language, the experience, So like I ask you this, and then we'll kind of move into some other questions, but like what did that do to you, like as a child? Like, were you, a perfectionist? Like, were you, like, did you act out? Because I think that's really important to call out for folks.
I love that question and also your vulnerability. I
Thank
love that. Thank you.
thank you for
Um,
yours. You're making it easy. I'm just mirroring you. So thank you.
yeah. So great question. The way that it affected me personally is for the first half of my life before hormones hit, I was a super perfectionist. So I would win like student of the year in kindergarten. I have this memory where, and it makes me feel so heartbroken for my inner child, but I could not make a mistake. I'd never wanted to make a mistake. And there was this memory where my kindergarten teacher, who I loved and, wanted to be her favorite, that was part of my trauma response. I wanted to be someone's favorite, their favorite student, their favorite friend, their favorite person. And so she handed out ice cream and she just reminded us, we were in kindergarten, little kids, don't spill, be very careful. Don't let this fall on the floor. She reminded and reminded and reminded. Another one of my trauma responses is that I would space out. It was really hard for me to focus. This is so common with trauma. Our attention span is really affected. And so, I really wanted to please my teacher, but I remember that I dropped my ice cream. And I was sobbing so uncontrollably. And this was the sweetest teacher. I think her name was like Mrs. Goodman. Shout out to you. You're
Shout
amazing.
out to you.
Shout out to teachers in general.
Right?
And
Seriously.
the way she responded to me making this mistake, I could tell, and the reason why I never forget this is her face was, she was confused. She
Mm.
was so confused. She's like, it's okay, sweetie. Like, it's okay. And I was like hyperventilating, like ugly crying. And I just remember seeing her face and she just couldn't understand why I could not regulate after making that mistake. Like, it wasn't okay because at home, when I made a mistake, the consequences were dire. Abuse, all types of abuse, physical, sexual,
Woo.
emotional.
Mm.
And so, yeah, perfectionism and trying to be good, which is also the underlying, and I say this because it's just such a common experience. My biggest, still to this day, my biggest negative cognition that I always try to work against is like the I am bad. because growing up, you always get in trouble if you have a narcissistic parent. It's always your fault. Everything's you're to blame.
100%. There's no accountability on their end for sure.
Yeah. So, and it's like this adult blaming a kid for all their anger and woes. And, but as a kid, you think it is all my fault. And
Mhm.
so you try to be good. So this was half of my life, trying to be as good and perfect as possible. And then when I hit my hormonal stage in middle school, I went the opposite way. Complete rebel, started drugs and alcohol, rebelling against, fighting back. When he would do his abuse tactics, I would say, okay, hit me, because I'm gonna call CPS then, hit me then. And I just developed that like I'm gonna fight back. I kind of moved from a shut down freeze trauma response to a fight and flight trauma response of like, you're not going to continue to treat me like this. And even though I couldn't get out of that situation, I started fighting back.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing, first of all. And you've just said so much. So I'm like, where do we even go from here? I'm going to start with your early childhood, like when you had that experience with your teacher. It is so interesting. Like we shared very similar roads because I was very much like a people pleaser, when I was younger and just wanted to do everything right. I didn't want anyone to be upset with me. And, definitely the teacher's favorite resonated with me, like a lot of the teachers like, oh, you're my favorite. So I just knew I was doing something well. But, it's so interesting when you grow up in whether it's a household or you're in a situation where fear is replaced with love. It's like that's your barometer. And so your teacher met you with the complete opposite, which was such love, such a loving response. And it was probably foreign to you too, and so she's looking at you confused and you're probably like, I'm, freaking out over here because that was you were living in such a fear state, and I think even as adults, fast forward, we still live in a more fear-based way than in a loving way, and it's something I'm constantly working with clients on, is getting out of that fear and getting very present in the love space, but we're either concerned about the past wounds, past trauma, past mistakes, or worried about our future, which is all fear-based, so it's so interesting that you called that out, and I can recall, similar experiences like making a mistake, dropping water, getting yelled at. It's like, and it's really a trauma wound within that parental, that parent, and that they haven't healed, and so their communication style is all fear-based, because that's just what they know, that's what they learned, and so, you know, today I'm, very understanding of that, because I understand that people only have the tools that they have, and their operating systems are their operating systems. And a lot of it is wound based. So, hurt people hurt people. But I love that you shared that. And then on the flip side is the rebel. And I think I've seen that pattern so many times in people, but no one comes to their rescue.
Mm.
No one like they just see them as a bad kid and then they
Mhm.
label them that, and I really struggle with that because when I see kids acting out, I'm like, that's a call for help. Answer the damn call. So, did anyone answer your call?
Beautifully said. And so I would say friends.
Hmm.
Friends have, so I did ayahuasca in the Amazon in Peru with a shaman, and this was like 6 years ago or so. And what my main message was like, my friends have saved my life. I never had an adult that saw or noticed or identified. And that part, it was something I really have had to work through. I've worked through that now, but that was a huge wound. I had this huge part in me that felt like I was screaming, like, why didn't you notice? Like, how didn't you see? And this, that's the kind of like abuse survivor of like,
Hmm.
please, like someone just notice that something isn't right. And, that's why even these sorts of conversations are so important because it raises awareness of like, what are these signs? This kid acting out is not just out of nowhere. Even so, I got my undergrad in teaching, and I discovered that I cared way more about why my kids were acting out versus like teaching them things I didn't think really mattered that much. And, also teachers aren't appreciated as much as they should or paid as much as they should too. Yeah, and so no adults really noticed. And my friends, thank goodness for my friends. They saved my life and time after time after time.
Oh my gosh. God bless your friends. And I think it takes for, us to have that experience, whether it's a friend, whether it is an adult, that just creates a safe space for us. That's the beginning of healing, is to be able to speak freely about it and tell the truth, because until then, it's something that will continue to come up in your body, because the body keeps the score.
Mm,
Talk to me a little bit about individuals struggling with complex PTSD or attachment issues. Like, what are the first steps that they can take towards healing?
mhm. So the first step is always awareness. The first step is always like, what is even happening? We need to get clear on like what's going on. What are my symptoms? What are my like? How does this show up for me? Before we can figure out. Sometimes we try to jump to a solution, and our bodies aren't ready for that. We need to know, like, we need to raise awareness. And so, some different ways of doing that is like mindfulness. And not straight, just like, okay, I'm going to be sitting with my emotions for 2 hours because that can be really triggering for someone just entering the field of healing. So yeah, I would say like starting therapy, starting trauma coaching, starting to reach out with someone who specializes in this. I think it's really important to work with someone that specializes with it because, tr being trauma informed and understanding trauma is central and helping, the practitioner helping you kind of work through it. Um, Also community. So, finding safe people, finding one safe person, one safe friend, one safe family member, whoever it is, as long as you have one safe person, it makes the world of difference. And opening up. So that's the first step is like awareness, like kind of like what's happening, what happened, what's happening, just starting to notice like a fact-finding process a little bit. And then nervous system regulation, I would say, is the next piece. Um, I mean, really, before diving into the past, really, or kind of working through any of the trauma, we need to be at somewhat of a nervous system regulation area. In the therapy world, it's like you have a window of tolerance. And at the top is like when you have panic attacks, anxiety, like if you go over, your symptoms are really intense. And then if you go under, you shut down. So you want to stay in the window of tolerance. And that eventually your window of tolerance increases. So as you learn to regulate your nervous system, as you learn to listen to your body, then you're able to kind of do more of that work. So I would say that's the next step is nervous system regulation. And there's so many different ways. Yoga is a beautiful way. Any mind body, mindfulness meditation, body scanning, movement, dance, exercise, any sort of mind body piece is really good for that grounding. And then the next step after that, I would say, is more of the healing from the past. And that can be like the reparenting piece, healing your inner child, doing therapy modalities like EMDR, IFS, really tools that you don't just repeat the story over and over because that can be re-traumatizing. You actually have a tool to be able to feel it and release it. So something important to mention is exposure therapy is really at the core of all evidence-based trauma healing. So what that means is that once you get to that third step of like, I know what's going on with myself, I'm kind of more self-aware, I've done nervous system regulation. then that trauma healing, it's going to be a little intense, because you are going to need to feel it to heal it. You are going to need to go back to little you and really understand her experience, his or her experience, and yeah, do some of that repair. So I'm
Love
sure,
that.
as everyone watching knows, trauma healing is not an easy process, but especially
No.
that process is one of the toughest, and that's why doing the nervous system regulation is really important before.
Yeah, I love that you broke it down in those steps. And it's so, even though it's complicated, it takes time, but it's also, you did it in such a beautifully simply way. Like I love the way that you kind of explain that for the audience. You talked about EMDR and IFS, which are two very powerful tools to use. Like talk to the audience a little bit about that. Like, what is it, and kind of share your approaches and why these two are very effective in trauma recovery.
Oh, I love EMDR and IFS so much, so much. And I will say, like, I've had 10 years in this helping field, healing mental health trauma, and I've learned a ton of modalities. And I very particularly choose the ones I choose because they are the most effective personally and what I've noticed with clients. So and the reason both of these I love and somatic experiencing and mindfulness, those are like my four faves. The reason for that is because they were a little before their time in the mind-body connection. So The Body Keeps the Score, a book by Bessel van der Kolk. He's amazing. Definitely recommend everyone reading that. Um, Talked about, he was kind of like the first pioneer of, okay, trauma's held in our body. Like we can intellectually understand, oh, I was a kid, that wasn't my fault. But we might have a huge reaction when someone wants to have sex with us and we've had sexual abuse, or, someone we feel like a partner leaves during a fight and we're like, oof, we have this huge reaction and we're like, I intellectually know everything's fine, but I'm either shutting down or I'm having an overreaction. And that's kind of a trauma response. So EMDR. This is something I've done personally for my trauma and I do for clients as well. EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. It's a long, confusing name. They actually thought about changing it because it's so long and confusing, but everyone already had heard about it. So they're like, okay, it's too late now. But yes, EMDR, basically what it is you take memories in the past and you use bilateral stimulation either through eye movements or tapping. There's a couple other ways, but essentially you just stimulate both parts of the body, in the brain and body, and you work through memories in the past one at a time. Um, the reason for this is when we have a huge traumatic memory, there's a part of our brain and body that gets stuck there. Whether it's stuck in our body, whether it's stuck in our mind, it just doesn't get fully processed because it's too intense for us as humans to process things like that traumatically, whether we're kids or adults. If it's traumatic enough, we don't fully process it. And on top of that, did we have support at the time? So we can actually get through a heck of a lot as humans if we have support. But a lot of folks with trauma, and I say this to validate you all, the reason why people develop complex PTSD is because they didn't have appropriate support when they were going through the trauma. So not only were they traumatized, but they were alone in it, which is just heart-wrenching. So EMDR works through the past. Essentially, the past affects the present and it helps clear out our emotional wounds from the past. We'll never, of course, forget what we've been through, but it won't emotionally affect us in the present. And that is what EMDR gives us, which is incredible.
I almost
It
feel
doesn't
like it's
just,
like an energy mover, like at least that's what I've experienced when I'm very big on the tapping, and it's what it felt like to me is like I'm moving that trauma energy like out of its spot that it's in and like giving it an opportunity to move through and out. And so that's really like how I explain it in a simple way to people. It's like an energy. It starts with your energy, it moves the trauma energy around.
that's perfectly described. I love that. An
Yeah.
energy mover, a
Yeah.
hundred
Yeah.
percent. That's what it is. Yeah. And then IFS. internal family system. So this wonderful man, Dick Schwartz, he was doing family therapy. And as we know in family therapy, everybody has a role in the family. So there's like, not that they want that role, but they have a
Oh,
role.
they're just giving it.
They're given it. The scapegoat, which is often in narcissistic families, the funny one, the golden child, all of these different roles that everyone plays. And Dick Schwartz said, I'm wondering if you can turn this model inward, and we have all these different parts. And it's so true. It's like everyone has experienced it when they say, oh, part of me wants to do this, but part of me wants to do that. And that's when we really realize, oh, like we have all these different parts coming up and different protectors. Essentially, IFS, we get to know our different parts and we want to heal them, develop healthy relationships with them, and integrate them. So it's just like you would do in family therapy. You want to get to know the part of you, the funny one, the disassociator, the there's so many different ones. Let me think of some good ones with trauma. The disassociator is really common. The like the blanking out, like you just kind of go numb, you forget what you're thinking. There's also like the perfectionist. There's just so many different parts. There's an endless amount. But essentially, they all came online at some time in our life, and sometimes they're still helpful, and sometimes they're not helpful anymore. For example, like an addiction part was helpful in the past. There's a reason why we started using substances or gambling or sex or whatever it was. And in the present, those parts might not be helping us anymore. They might like the over busy part that might have really worked in the past. Maybe it's not helping us anymore. And so that's something that's really helpful with IFS is we learn like what are our parts. Different people trigger different parts in us. And yeah, it's just all about developing healthy relationships within ourselves and healing those.
Oh, I love that. And I'm familiar with both, as you can tell. And I really love both of those as well. And I'll tell you, like with the IFS, it's really like an opportunity to learn yourself deeper. When I'm working with clients, I'm like, I've centered my whole coaching business around them being very clear on themselves and all their parts, and then getting to a place of radical acceptance and then
Mm,
understanding, because that's really where you can meet yourself is like loving, like really accepting those parts, but then loving them and then figuring out like which parts you can use today, like which parts serve you. So then you can serve whichever community you're serving, whether that's a stay-at-home mother serving her family, a leader in an organization, an entrepreneur building their business. But it really, everything, all the healing starts with yourself first in order for you to really inspire or be able to help someone else. So thank you so much for explaining that. I don't think anyone's really broken it down in that way. And I've talked to a lot of people. So thank you so much. Audience, hope you guys are taking some notes. That's awesome. Well, many people are also curious about, you mentioned a little bit about somatic experience healing. Can you explain how trauma is stored in the body, and how somatic, kind of releases that trauma?
mhm. So I'll give you an example for this. Trauma stored in the body. I'll give a personal example. So I have experienced, I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse, and just like all trauma, sexual abuse is stored in the body in different ways. And when I first told my first friend that this happened, I was 21 and my jaw locked up. Like physically, I couldn't move it for like 20 minutes or so. And it was the most wild experience. It's not like I was thinking anything. My body just reacted. I've had that experience a few times early on. And I've also had experiences when the first time I had sex. When I had stopped drinking, I have not drank in over 10 years. I stopped drinking at 21. And it was sober sex for the first time. And it was with someone I had been with for years and felt really safe with, and my body froze. And those are just some examples. of how trauma can be stuck in the body, how that can manifest. And, my clients have, there's thousands of examples how it can show up, but those are just two really big examples of how it showed up in my own life and how that told me, like, oh, this is my body is having its own experience regardless of, what I'm thinking and feeling, like my body is speaking to me. And so, as far as how it can be moved through, it's like you said, EMDR is an energy mover. Somatic experiencing is the same way. The thing I love about it is we don't have to over intellectualize when we're doing somatic work. As trauma survivors and speaking for myself, I over intellectualize everything. I am not naturally a person that's like, oh, I'm in my body. Now I kind of am that person, but it's after been a ton of work. Typically, though, I was just disassociated, always in my head, thinking a thousand, my thoughts were like just going all the time. And um, the thing I love about it is we can have all these thoughts about trauma and we can go through, and some people have gone through talk therapy for trauma or childhood trauma for 30 years and feel like I'm in the same place as I was before. What's happening? But it's because they haven't touched into the body part of it, which the majority, so this is important, the majority of information sent to our nervous system, the vast majority, like 85%, is sent from our body to our nervous system, not from our mind. So it's that kind of is why it tells you like we need to listen to the body. And so an example is like if I was doing it with myself right now, I would just be like, okay, like what am I feeling? I would start by scanning. And right now I'm actually feeling calm, which is beautiful, but I might notice a heaviness in my spine. And let's say I was talking about like a traumatic memory with the person, and then we would just scan. And we don't need to go through detail by detail what happened. We just need to listen to the body, like, and what it might look like. And I'm just kind of making this up because I don't feel this way right now, but I might feel like, oof, like a stabbing in my chest. And it's like, okay, take a moment, be with that, breathe. What do you notice? Like, okay, I notice that it's kind of moving to my stomach. And so it moves around, it transforms, it tells us things. We ask questions like if it had a color, if it had a size. Sometimes images come to mind, like, oh, I see myself in the middle of the ocean by myself drowning, and it's more of like that feeling that comes up when we see it. So it's abstract in that way. Sometimes it can feel like a dream state where we get different images and different thoughts, but essentially, we don't have to get too in the weeds of the past. We're just focusing on now what's going on in our body, which can feel like a huge relief to a lot of trauma survivors. Like, I don't have to like think and relive and talk about everything. Like, I need to just feel and let it move through. And it does. It moves through.
I love that you called out the present. And, again, I'll talk about the fear and the love because it's like, I think your body responds when you're able to be in a more present state, and not going back, like you said, to that trauma state, which, will then bring up all these fears and kind of I would say like pain in your body, but staying within that loving space that allows you to really identify it, in a way that you're just not able to when you're in that fear space. So I love that you described it that way. And
Yeah,
yeah, please.
if it's okay, I have one more thing to say about that. It's so because this is a really big fear in a lot of my clients of going in the past. It's okay to be triggered in a safe space in therapy. So something I went to a somatic conference recently with like Bessel and Dr. Mate and just all of my heroes, right? The creator of somatic experiencing. And something that they said, which I really loved, is like, there's no such thing as 100% safety. The world, you're going to be triggered a little bit. And especially in therapy, like it's okay to be triggered, because that's how you heal it. So I do want to say, we work through things in the present, and it's okay to do kind of like the exposure therapy thing in the past, as long as you have a way to move through it and it's not just to be reliving it.
Yes, that's
So
that's what I was meaning. Like if you're
yeah,
in by yourself, not in a safe space. And like, it's so different than when you're present in a safer space to do it, and move through it. Like, it's so, I love that you said that. I need to know what conference that was so I can go. That's awesome. You have to tell me about it. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I think it's called like the somatic immersion. It was the first one they did all together. I'll send you the information. I think they're probably having it again next year, but it was great.
I would love to go. That's awesome. Well, we talked a little bit about narcissistic abuse, and how it can leave a very deep emotional wound. Like, how do you guide clients in recognizing first and then working on recovering from those toxic patterns? Because that's really what they are. Those are toxic patterns.
Absolutely. So I would say it's similar to kind of like the process I said with trauma is the first thing is noticing and having awareness, but this can actually be a longer process with healing from narcissistic abuse because there's so much gaslighting that happened. And I'm sure you all know what gaslighting is, but just someone who makes you question your reality. And you have a certain experience and they make you question your experience. You see something happening with the person in the dynamic, they deny it, they turn it on you. So it's actually it's a bigger part with those healing from narcissistic abuse because the developing of awareness is they were told things by someone that they typically loved that often weren't true. And people who are not narcissists, um, we do not understand how anyone could lie like that. We do not understand how anyone could gaslight like that. It's really quite unbelievable. And so that's one of the first pieces is like, oh my gosh, this maybe I'm not this type of person that the narcissist always said I was. Maybe these situations weren't the way that they described. Maybe the way I felt was valid. Like it takes a long time to untie what gaslighting does to us. It harms us so deeply. And the fact that everyone blames everything on us, often those who are engaged in a narcissistic relationship. Narcissists love empaths. And so if you're an empath who's healing from narcissistic abuse, I mean, that's going to be even more harmful to you because you feel everything so deeply. An empath tries literally to do everything they can to make everyone feel loved and safe and secure. So they have this person that they love, who they don't know is a narcissist, who is telling them that their hate is their fault. And it's like, oh my gosh, that is the worst thing in the world for an empath. So they're going to do everything they can to compensate and take care and take ownership. But that is endless with a narcissist. Everything is your fault, and there's no end to the accountability that you need to take for their actions. And so I would say that's something that is different. And the healing from trauma and then healing from narcissists is the awareness piece is complicated because you're not just looking at the past, you're really seeing like, was this really how it was, or is this just how they presented it to be? Is this really how I am, or is this just how they always described me?
Oh my gosh. It is so, you just hit so many spot on moments there because the gaslighting, it does so much more, I feel, than like certain traumas, right, that we experience because the gaslighting is all of our body. It's like every sense is being gaslit. And so it's really trying to make sense of that. And as an empath, it's even harder because you're always trying to empathize. And you're always trying to understand and get to an understanding, and you will never get to an understanding. Like your brain, as hard as you try, it will never get to an understanding. And so that was something that was really difficult for me because I always start curious, and
Mm,
I'm always trying to understand, like, okay, where is this coming from? Like trying to trace it back to that particular wound that that person might have experienced. And it's like you're exhausted like all the time, and
mm,
that's why I explain to people, it's like it's an entire body experience and it's this exhaustion that you can't explain, and it lasts. as long as you're in it, and then for some cases years after, because you're not only unlearning, which is what you were talking about, but then also relearning, because you're like, wait, is this true, or what part of that is true? Because relationships are mirrors, right, in some cases, but with a narcissist, it's a very clouded mirror. And so when I'm working with clients, I try and get them to understand it's not a typical mirror that you would have with a, relatively healthy person, right? If we're using terms healthy, unhealthy. With a narcissist, it's a very clouded mirror that is not the same. And so I love that you explained it that way.
I love what you just said. Hit the nail on the head with what you just said too, and the exhaustion. The exhaustion. I mean, yeah, I'm really glad that you said that because it's so important and it does affect every fiber of our being. And it's something that, if you have experienced narcissistic abuse, you understand, and it's hard to fully understand if you haven't lived through narcissistic abuse. And that's why I think it's important to have spaces where people are talking directly about that. Because it's a different set of abuse. It's a different experience, and it deserves, you know, um, professionals, people who have been through it. And yeah, because the healing journey is going to be a little bit different.
So different. And then also what's challenging is all the gaslighting that happens after the relationship. And so that's what makes it even harder to heal. And then don't include if you have children with that particular person, then it makes it 10 times harder. They're in a punishing, or was privy to the smear campaign. So I had that happen, for years. And it's what I do, and something that has served me. I don't always recommend this for everyone, but what served me is I did nothing. I didn't say anything. I didn't try and correct any smear campaigns because I took all of my energy back and I used it for my healing. And I refuse to give any more energy towards that direction of my life. And I released it with love. And I started with love with myself because there was things that I just didn't know, like going into certain relationships, I just didn't know what I didn't know. So I had to get to a place of forgiveness with myself for not knowing, not recognizing certain things. Because you get to, a point where you start blaming yourself, and it affects your worthiness, your self-love, all these things. But you really have to understand that their whole role is to come in and confuse you and to provide as much confusion as possible so then you have no clarity. So you have to forgive yourself for that, and allow yourself to really put as much distance. I'm like, the whole gray rock thing is a real thing. I just became very boring. I'm like, please leave me. You go there. I'm gonna keep living my life, and I just poured into my healing, and really focused on myself, my children, and then more importantly, like, learning about that, not in it, but doing research and really getting to a place of understanding. So, oh my gosh, we can talk so much about this, but it's so true. It's like really getting with people who understand it is key. It really is. Whether it's a community, whether it's beautiful women like her, or working with coaches that specialize in this. One of the things that I worked on setting is boundaries. And talk to me about that. Like, how do you kind of help your clients navigate, like, first learning how to set boundaries and then also like hold those boundaries?
Yes. First, I want to just honor your story that you just said and just the badass woman that you are, and is a really beautiful example. Yeah, just want to honor you for a second.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. So boundaries. Boundaries are so important, and often so annoying, right? It's really difficult to set boundaries, but it's life-changing. So what I work with folks on is first self-trust,
Mm.
Self-trust is the thing that just gets demolished, stomped on, and thrown away when we are in relation with a narcissist or, a really abusive relationship. And so, first, it's realizing and getting in touch with our needs. We can't set a boundary unless we know what the heck we need and what we don't. And so, that's a big process. Like understanding, who am I? What do I accept? What don't I accept? Is a new process for a lot of folks healing from abuse. And so that's the first step is like, what do I even need? Because then I'm able to set boundaries. But, a lot of folks in the past is like, everything's okay as long as you are happy. And I have no needs at all. But that's not true. We all have needs. So it's recognizing I have needs. What are my needs? That's a big process, recognizing our own needs. What feels good to us somatically? What's a yes? What's a no? That's going to take some time and some building some trust back. So that's the first step. Then you start trying to do it. This is something that is going to be uncomfortable for folks at first because, and maybe always. I just imagine it like it's going to be me and my fear holding hands as we set this boundary
Yeah.
because my fear's not going away. My fear might say, "You're going to push the person away. You're too much. This is going to make them see you as a burden. There are other people who aren't going to have this many boundaries." My fear might say all those things at the beginning, and I'll just say, "Thanks for trying to protect me, fear," and I'm going to set the boundary anyway. And I'm going to set the boundary anyway, and I'm going to set the boundary. And so it's understanding my needs, then it's setting the boundary. And then it's holding the boundary. I'm glad that you said that because they're different things. You can
Yes.
set a boundary, but you need to hold it. So something I love, a quote with boundaries is boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me at the same time. Love
That
that.
is so good. Oh my gosh. That is so good. Ooh,
Yes.
that's
And
good.
also with boundaries is so boundaries are not for you to enforce, they are for me to enforce. So that's something that we get confused about is like, okay, let's say, for example, I have someone with addiction in my family, which my narcissistic perpetrator had an addiction. But let's say you have someone with an addiction and you don't want them coming over high on whatever it is. So you say, I would love to see you for the holidays, but a boundary for me right now is I just don't want anyone really high, under this substance, meth or whatever it is, on in my house. It just doesn't make me feel safe. So it's like it's not about them, it's just in general, this is a boundary for me. So that's the first step, right? I have a need where I feel unsafe if someone's really out of their mind, high in my house. Okay, great. So that's the first step. The second is I'm going to assert it. But the third step that people think is like, okay, well, it's actually on them to figure it out and the boundary, but it's like, no, they can decide to honor it or not honor it. And then what am I going to do? So that's what I need to figure out. If they come over still high on meth or just whatever the case is, now what? It's like, okay, well, my boundary is that you don't come over on this. If you do, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to let you in. Maybe that's my boundary. Maybe the boundary is if you do, um, I'd love to help take you to a treatment center, but I won't be able to spend time. Or maybe it's I can spend time outside for 10 minutes, but then I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. There's no right or wrong thing for me to do with enforcing the boundary. It's whatever feels right to me. No one can look at me and say, you need to just kick them out. Maybe that's what I want, or maybe I want to sit outside for 5 minutes and talk to them, or maybe, there's no right or wrong way to enforce it, but we need to make sure to hold our boundaries because if we don't hold our boundaries, then we are telling the person, like, I'm just telling you, but I'm not going to hold it. And it's up to us to hold our boundaries.
Exactly. Oh, yes, exactly. That's why I asked it that way because I think a lot of people get confused thinking that the ownership goes to the person that you're holding the boundary with, and it's not. The ownership stays with you. And so you get to decide, this is where we all get to put our, big boy, big girl panties on, and really like own whatever our boundary is, and here's the thing, your boundary can shift a little bit, but like that day, like maybe your boundary was like, oh, that person needs to leave, or maybe that day you're like, you know what, I will spend about 10 minutes, with that person on my front porch. But then after that, he needs to go or he or she needs to go. Like that's okay too, but definitely draw a firm line, and I think that's the challenge that I have seen in clients, and also like when I was working on my boundaries within myself, like where I would bend my boundaries to kind of, appease that particular person or situation. And it's such a betrayal to ourselves, and I think that's what we then feel after. Then we start to feel bad, and then and then you carry that energy again, going back to energy. So a boundary is really for you, to then teach people how to treat you, but then also like allow them to practice, because this is the other thing, no one's going to get your boundaries overnight. There are going to be some people who get it right away and they're like, hey, I support you, I got your back. But there are some people that aren't as regulated, aren't as, in a space where they're just healthy. And so they're going to need some practice, and so I work with my clients. I'm like, you're going to have to, like, just like you're building a muscle and working out, like you're going to have to build this boundary muscle, not
Mm.
just for yourself, but also with the people that you're holding the boundary for.
I love it. Absolutely. Yep, 100%. And boundaries are so, 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 so important. The last thing I'll say about boundaries is, um, there's a therapist that says this. I can't think of her name right now. Um, but the good inside, the podcast woman, I can't, Becky something. Anyways, she says the earlier that you set the boundary, the less you will have to enforce, like set it. So for example, like if you tell someone, oh, even something simple like, oh, I don't allow shoes in my house, then they understand the first time they come over, they take their shoes off. But if you let them wear the shoes in and then you tell them the next time, they're going to be kind of upset. Like, I could wear them last time. And so it's okay at any point to set a boundary. And it's also a good thing to set them early on. Some people worry like, oh, I need to get more comfortable. And it's like, well, actually, the firmer you are early on, the less you're going to have to set them in the future. So I encourage folks with new friends, new connections, new romantic partners, set your boundaries early because then it's just like, well, this is who I am. And, there's less trying to wiggle around them. It's like, oh, this is who this is, and this is their boundaries.
Exactly. You're teaching people your operating system. And that's really what is so important. Like we all have operating systems, we all have different boundaries, different thresholds, tolerance, and you're really teaching people early on. And this isn't an opportunity to shame anyone who hasn't, done this, but really understand what works for you, and even if you do it later on in the relationship, there's no wrong or right there, and your boundaries can change at any moment because what works for you maybe last year doesn't work this year, and that's okay too. Gosh, I could talk to you all day. I just love talking to you. I love the way you explain things. Like you're so thorough. I can imagine how you work with clients. Before we talk about, if you are taking on new clients, tell me, like, do you have any rituals that kind of help you stay centered? Like, how do you feel your mind, your body, and your soul when you're taking care of all of these clients?
Yeah. So my biggest medicine right now is rest. There's so many little things like I have my happy light on right now. I have my crystals around me. I do a lot of meditation. I've been doing more art recently, not to, sell it or not to have it look good on a wall, but just to let things out. I've been doing that, yoga. I'm doing a trauma-informed yoga teacher training in Portugal in like 3 weeks. So that's going to be exciting.
So cool.
But yeah, this this season of winter and like looking at the, leaves that have fallen off the tree and how a lot of animals go in hibernation. I notice my body craving that too. And something that had to do recently, which has really helped me, is I've just kind of detached from wanting to be different this time of year. It's like this time of year is triggering because it's the holidays. This time of year, I'm feeling more tired because there's less sunlight. And, my energy levels are different than they are in summer. And I accept that now. Like fighting against it, like I want to have more energy or I want to do this. It's like, this is how my body's feeling right now. And I'm just going to listen to my body. And so the medicine is I need more rest this time of year. And that's just what I need. And it's not good nor bad. It's just what I need.
I love, love, love that you said that because I've been feeling the same way, and I'm normally a very high energy person, and all year round, year after year, and for whatever reason this year, and I think it's part of my deeper healing too. Like we are on a healing journey, or the rest of our lives. Like we're not ever going to be completely healed, right? And so, but I feel like my body's requiring more rest, and so I've been honoring that. Whereas in the past, the former athlete in me would just like push through or tap in or figure out like why am I tired, and maybe find a fix for it, if you will, or like you use the word medicine. I love that, find a natural medicine for that. And this time around, I'm like, it's okay. It's okay to pause, to rest, to really honor that. And so I love that you called that out for anyone else who's feeling this. I love that. I know you mentioned a book earlier, The Body Keeps the Score. Do you have any other books that you would recommend to our audience, or podcasts that you listen to on a regular basis, that you would love to share?
So, let me go to my website. I have all my books that I recommend. I'll just run through them really quickly. So, the books I love are The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel, Radical Acceptance by Brock, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, When Things Fall Apart by Chodron, The Happiness Trap by Harris, Waking the Tiger by Levine, The Mindfulness Self-Compassion book by Kristen Neff, and then The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. And then the only podcast I really am obsessed with is, and I actually listen to it I don't work with children, but I work with people's inner child, so it's kind of similar. So Dr. Becky G, who I was trying to mention earlier, she has a podcast called Good Inside, and I really love
I'm gonna check
her
that out.
podcast. So those would be my book and podcast recommendations.
Okay, incredible books, by the way. There's a couple I haven't read, so I'm definitely going to add those to my list. And the last question is like, where can people find you, and are you taking on new clients?
So I'm actually pretty full right now. But I mean, you can reach out and see. I'm not a huge fan of wait lists because I want people to get the care they need. But yeah, you can reach out if you're like super wanting to meet with me and I can put you on a wait list. But I mostly run around full. But the thing I do have coming out that I'm really excited about that will allow my services to reach more people, because like I said, I'm really full typically with clients is I have been working on for the last 5 months, and I'm going to work for 2 more months, so 7 months on a course to heal from narcissistic abuse, online course, because my individual services, my sliding scale rate is 125 to 275 an hour, and some people, it's inaccessible price wise, and so this whole course that's going to be lengthy and comprehensive, the whole thing is 222 for the whole course. And it's going to be a lot of good information. Like I have worked, I can't even count how many hours on this course so far. So it's coming out February 22nd of 25 because it's 222 25. I'm all about angel numbers and things like that. So yeah, keep your eye out for my online course for healing from narcissistic abuse. It's really, really comprehensive, and I think it could really help people who are healing from narcissistic abuse.
Oh my gosh, amazing. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for your course. I'm going to definitely share it on Sunday Soul Day social media as well as mine. So definitely let me know, and I'll make sure to link it everywhere. Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. Like I said, I can talk to you all day, and we share so much in common. And I just love the way you explain things so beautifully. So I can only imagine how amazing your course is. I can't wait to take it myself, and also share it with clients. So thank you so much for coming on and blessing Sunday Soul Day.
Thank you so, so much for reaching out. It was a gift to chat with you, and just your energy is palpable and beautiful and calming and safe. So thank you for creating this space.
Thank you so much. And everyone, please share your favorite part about this amazing conversation with Renee. And as always, have an amazing Sunday.